Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to my November Reading Journal wrap-up. I can't believe that November is already over. The month completely flew by. We're officially moving into December, which means it's almost the end of the year, and that is a terrifying thought. I'm definitely looking forward to the new year, but at the same time, it feels like things are moving really fast. I ended up reading 5 books this month, so it was a little less busy than last month. I have officially finished all of my required books for the semester, which feels like a huge weight off my shoulders. Hopefully, this means December will be filled with books of my own choosing. It's been a while since I've had that luxury. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see. For now, I'm setting up my November cover page. You might notice that I'm using a brush pen on this page. Back in February, I stated, whether I like it or not, I'm going to get better at using the brush pens. I said that, and then I never used the brush pens again. I just wasn't very confident using them, and I wanted to make sure that my writing actually looked decent. So because we're almost at the end of the year, I wanted to get my brush pens out and try again, but this time with a bit more knowledge and practice thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives. All their classes are led by expert-level creators made for creatives. Whether you're looking to improve your writing skills, get into animation, or expand your marketing strategies, they have thousands of unique classes to help you elevate your work, hobbies, and skills to the next level. If you're like me and you're looking to improve your brush pen and calligraphy skills, I've been taking Shannon Lane's class, Basics of Hand Lettering, Create Beautiful Lettering with Brush Pens. She explains not only the basics of hand lettering and how to use brush pens effectively, but she also walks you through all the best supplies you might need and how to turn your hand lettering into beautiful pieces of art. I've learned new, better ways to write out certain letters, and I feel a lot more confident with the brush pen than I did before. If you're interested in taking Shannon's class, or any of the classes available, the first 500 people to use my link in the description box will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you once again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. The quote I've selected for November is from Beartown, which was my favorite read from last month. The quote says, "All the good you do today will be forgotten by others tomorrow. Do good anyway." I thought this was a really important thing to remember, and I wanted to immortalize it here in my journal. I've mentioned this before, but I really haven't been a huge fan of my cover pages this year. I took a more simplistic approach compared to previous years, and ultimately, I just don't love how these pages look. As I've been planning my 2025 reading journal, I've been playing around with how I want these pages to look going forward. I'm very excited to move on from this format, but there's only 1 month left in 2024, which is freaky, but I think I can handle it one more time. But with that, the cover page is complete. For my first spread, I'm actually combining 2 books into 1 page, so you'll see me jump between the 2 pages. But the first book I read isn't actually a full book, it's only a section of a book. I wasn't sure if I was going to include this as a book read, but because it took so much mental power to read, I decided to include it. And it is The Wife of Bath by Geoffrey Chaucer. The Wife of Bath is one of the stories featured in the Canterbury Tales from the 15th century, and it is one of the only stories in that collection told by a woman. It's told in 2 parts, the prologue and the tale. In the prologue, the narrator, Alison, recounts her feelings on marriage and chastity, basing her opinions on the 5 men she's been married to. The first 3 are described as quote-unquote good husbands because they're old and submissive. But the other 2 are younger and not so easily controlled. Ultimately, she believes that women have the right to marry as many times as they want, and she doesn't concern herself with the traditional views of purity put upon women. In her tale, she tells the story of an Arthurian knight who, after assaulting a young maiden, is tasked by the queen to find the answer to the question, "What do women most desire?" If he cannot find the answer after a year, he'll be killed. He meets an old woman who agrees to tell him the answer in exchange for a favor, and she tricks him into marrying her. However, after learning the answer to the question, that women want complete authority over men, the knight gives the old woman the power in their relationship, and she transforms into a beautiful, submissive wife. The second book I'm journaling about is The Wife of Willesden by Zadie Smith. It wasn't the second book I read this month, but it made more sense to put it here. This is a play written as a transformation to Chaucer's Wife of Bath. It takes the original story and modernizes certain aspects, such as having the story set in a British pub, and the wife character is a British Jamaican woman. Instead of basing the tale in Arthurian England, The Wife of Willesden's tale is set in 18th century Jamaica. Generally speaking, though, the story itself is essentially the same as The Wife of Bath. The play emphasizes the idea of women's autonomy and authority in a male-dominated world. Overall, I'm torn on these stories, but leaning towards disliking them. I think it's really interesting to have a character like the Wife of Bath in the 15th century speaking so carelessly about women's liberation and sexual freedom. I think even in today's cultures, as seen in Zadie Smith's play, this approach might still be seen as relatively taboo. So it's exciting to see a powerful woman in a story of this time period. What is a bit unfortunate is that Chaucer wrote a retraction at the end of the Canterbury Tales where he apologized for some of the things he wrote, particularly in relation to the Wife of Bath. He essentially asked for a pardon from both readers and God for having written such lewd content. It definitely diminishes the story for me because it's not Chaucer taking a stand, it's him writing a strong woman and then acknowledging that he doesn't want women to actually behave like that. This is a change I really liked in Smith's play. A retraction is still given, but the writer in that play apologizes to the people who just simply don't like the play. It isn't a pardon for what happened content-wise, it's an acknowledgement that you have a right to dislike the play if that's how you feel. I also have mixed feelings on the tale too. Once again, I like how the women have a lot of power in this story, but I do question whether or not this book should be considered an early form of feminist literature, because I feel like it doesn't actually adhere to what feminism means. The prologue and the tale both highlight the idea that women want to be in control of men, whereas feminism is about equality. I think it would have been better if Smith had changed it so the stories were about women having agency, but that isn't what's being preached here. Also, I absolutely hated the knight. He is given way too much time to find the answer to the question, and after doing something horrible, he's rewarded with a submissive wife in the end. What he should have been rewarded with was a jail sentence. I chose a Barbie sticker sheet from Marigona Suli Art for these 2 pages. I wanted something similar on both sides, but I also wanted them to be different colors, so they stood out as different books. I've also added some stickers from Jolico and Jasmine Allen Draws on Etsy. The pink flower washi tape is also from Marigona Suli Art, and the other ones are from Hobby Lobby. I'd heard so many amazing things about Zadie Smith, and I was really excited to finally read something by her. I do feel like I'll need to read something different from her though, because after doing a bit of research on this play, she revealed that it was a one-and-done thing. And not that I'm a play expert, but I think it's clear that this is a debut play. However, I won't be reading anything else from Chaucer. The Middle English language used in this book took so much brainpower to get through. I gave The Wife of Bath 2 stars and The Wife of Willesden 3 stars. I don't think this story is for me, but I do see the potential for adapting it. Next up is My Body is Distant by Paige Maylott. This book is the story of Paige's life as a trans woman. It documents her childhood, finding comfort from reality in video games, and how ultimately video games offered the freedom of gender expression that allowed Paige to realize she was trans. This book offers 2 worlds: Paige's real world with real-life relationships, and her online life, one where life and love are fictionalized, but feel real. Through the collision of these two worlds, Paige discovers who she is and learns how to bring her online identity into reality. Something that I really liked about this book was the way Paige spoke about the value and importance of online spaces. I'm 24, so I'm part of the first generation to grow up with the internet. I know exactly what she means about being defined by a digital age. So much of my childhood was spent online on Club Penguin, Webkinz, YouTube, and so much more, having fun and learning new things. I maybe learned some things that I wasn't old enough to know about, but that was the nature of the early internet. I valued my online realities. I still do. This channel is a great example. This space is completely digital, but I've valued the contributions and conversations I've made here. Paige talks about the importance of supportive, exploratory online communities, and I have to agree with her. The internet is a great place to discover and share your interests with others and find who you are along the way. Another thing I thought was well done was her bluntness about coming out. Paige came out in her 30s, so she offers a different perspective on what it's like transitioning as an adult. She was very honest about the things she gained and the things she lost as a result. And one of the most interesting aspects was her conversation on disappointments. She accepts the feeling of disappointment even when things go right. She emphasizes that the journey to getting what you want is not always easy, and the reward at the end comes at the price of the challenges it took to get there. I decorated this spread with an orange California sticker sheet from Jolico. I paired it with a sticker of a girl with oranges from Jasmine Allen Draws on Etsy. I used part of this sticker sheet before in a spread I made last year, and it's always so interesting to see how different the spreads look even though they're made from the same inspiration. Like everything else I read this month, I read this book for one of my courses, and Paige is a local writer, so she visited our class to perform a reading and tell us more about her life, the writing process, and the publishing journey. It was really cool to hear her talk about her inspiration for the book. She said that it originally started as a master's thesis, but after her parents struggled to understand her transition and online community, she wrote this as a way to allow them to understand her. She also spoke about getting published, which I personally really appreciated. I would love to write a book someday, so it was really nice hearing about what that process was like. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave My Body is Distant 4.5 stars. I would highly recommend it if you like video games or are looking for a trans author to read from. The next book I read was yet another play. It was Dry Lips Oughta Move to Kapuskasing by Thompson Highway. This play follows 7 Cree men living on a reserve. Each man has his own aspirations for the community, but their lives are disrupted when the women decide to start an all-women's hockey team. This causes a lot of commotion, and the relationships between all 7 men begin to change for the worse. In addition, the spiritual trickster figure Nanabush watches over the reserve, taking on the identities of the various women in the community and causing havoc. I went into this play knowing it was about a women's hockey team, but it was so different from what I was expecting. There is only one actress in the entire play, and she performs the roles of all the women. There is never more than one woman on stage at a time, and most of the hockey content is revealed through conversations or the men watching the game. The audience never sees the game. The characters act like the hockey rink is where the audience is sitting. It's an interesting dynamic for the stage, and this play is funnier than I thought it would be. There's a character called Pierre St. Pierre who is hired to work as the referee for the women's first game, and he is all over the place. He is obsessed with the fact that women are playing hockey and makes it everyone else's business. He was definitely the most entertaining part of the play. While not all the men were excited about the women's hockey, it was interesting to see how they all interacted with each other. One character is incredibly passionate about baking and wants funding to open a bakery. This acts as a conflict with another character who wants funding for a radio station. While I don't like all the characters, the relationships between them are dynamic and intriguing to follow. The character Nanabush is a trickster, and she's used to reveal the misogynistic views of the men. She wears prosthetic body parts to accentuate her features, and some really awful stuff happens to her as she pretends to be the different women in the community. Like a lot of the other books I've read this fall, this play features an incredibly shocking assault scene. I know that it has numerous meanings because it's revealing the treatment of Indigenous women, and due to the specific nature of the scene, showing the forced assimilation of religion, but it's a really challenging scene to read. I mentioned this a bit last month, but when you're forced to read such difficult content back to back to back, it really starts to add up. I can recognize the intentions of the scene, but that doesn't make it any easier to process. Like with Beartown last month, I still don't have any hockey-themed stationery, so I decided to go in a completely different direction and used a bubble tea sticker sheet from Lollipop Studios on Etsy. It's colorful and fun, and I had a couple of bubble tea frogs from her fairy shop on Etsy to go with it. So I liked this play, but I didn't love it. I won't spoil the ending, but I did find it to be really frustrating. Like most plays, I think it would have been better seen than read. I gave Dry Lips Oughta Move to Kapuskasing 3 stars. Not the best, but not the worst. The last book I'll be setting up a spread for is Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. Of all the books that were assigned for my classes, this is the one I was really looking forward to. I'd seen it talked about online a bit, and I was curious to see what it was about. This book follows a young, unnamed narrator living in an Inuit community in northern Canada. She lives in a dangerous neighborhood where she is often neglected by her alcoholic family and abused by community members. However, after returning from residential school, she finds herself connecting with her environment in ways she hasn't before. She becomes much more spiritually connected to animals and the earth. But when she winds up pregnant, her life takes a drastic turn. I don't want to say much more than this because the book takes a lot of twists and turns, and if you're interested in reading it, I don't want to spoil what happens. For some reason, I went into this book thinking it was a horror novel. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe it was the cover and the title, but this book is not a horror novel. It's actually a bit difficult to pinpoint the genre of this book. It's poetry, it's magical realism, it's literary fiction, and it's even a little autobiographical. There's a lot packed into this little book, so much so that it felt a little overwhelming at times. I tried to compile a list of all the important conversations happening in this book, and the list was around 15 items long. It was a bit hard to determine which aspects I was supposed to be focused on because there were so many things going on. And like I said, magical realism was one of the genres of this book. It was difficult to decipher what was real and what wasn't. I personally believe that everything depicted in this book happened, but obviously some readers might disagree. I used a fairy sticker sheet from Rabbit Draw on Etsy to decorate this page. It has absolutely nothing to do with the book, but that's part of the fun. I also used some circle stickers from Ikigai Papier. I read the physical book along with the audiobook, and Tagaq performs throat singing in between each chapter. At first, it scared me because I wasn't expecting it, and it's a very aggressive way of singing. While I thought it was interesting and atmospheric, I'm not really sure what it was supposed to be adding to the story. None of the characters throat sing in the book, so other than general vibes, I couldn't figure out why that choice was made. Also, I don't know if it was because I was reading a later edition of the book, or maybe my audiobook loan downloaded weird, but the audiobook and the physical book did not always line up. There were certain words that were different in the two mediums. For example, on page 1 of the book, the narrator identifies someone as old woman. However, in the audiobook, she refers to her as the sad one. But these word changes are only minor differences in comparison to how the physical text is linear, whereas the audiobook had chapters in completely different places. It's a little hard to explain, but it's kind of like if chapters 11 through 15 were placed directly after chapter 5. So later chapters happened earlier in the audiobook and broke up the linear first half of the book. I decided to read the book the way it was written in the physical text, but if you've read this book as well and have some kind of answer, I'd love to know. So I liked it, kind of. It was definitely weird, but it was fun. I gave Split Tooth 3 stars. This is one I might reread in the future. You never know, I might be able to get over the strangeness later in life. And that is it for my November reading journal wrap-up. I said that I only read 5 books this month, but that isn't actually true. I read a 6th book, A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott, and while I enjoyed it, I read it so fast for school that I actually can't remember what happened. I went to write out my thoughts on it and realized I couldn't form any opinions. I DNF'd a book last month for the same reason. I read 75% of it in one sitting to have it read for class, and when I went to finish it a few days later, I realized that I hadn't processed any of it. I'm saving a spot in my journal for A Mind Spread Out on the Ground in case I decide to reread it or skim through it, but if I don't, I can always just glue the pages together. So November was alright. I only loved one of the books I read. It could also be that I'm just incredibly burnt out and finding it hard to enjoy the things I'm reading. But I'm getting excited about creating my new reading journal. I've started planning one for 2025 and I'm really liking how it's looking so far. It's going to be a very different vibe from this year's journal, so I'm really looking forward to it. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.